Africa is the second largest continent in the world, comprising 63 political territories subdivided into these 5 regions as per United Nations. These subdivisions differ slightly as per United Nations, African Union and Confederation of African Football. Geographically, the Africa is separated from the Europe by the Mediterranean Sea and from Middle East Asia by the Red Sea. Africa is joined to Asia by the Isthmus of Suez, which is transected by the 193 km long Suez Canal. Although the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt actually lies east of Suez Canal but is often considered a part of Africa. Africa is separated from rest of Asia by the Arabian Sea and Indian Ocean and from Americas by Atlantic Ocean. From the northernmost to the southernmost point, the Africa spans approximately 8,000 kilometers, and from easternmost to westernmost point, Africa spans 7,400 kilometers. It is the only continent in the world through which both the tropics, that is Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn, equator and prime meridian passes. Equator divides Africa in almost 2 equal halves, and whole of Africa lies in tropical climatic zone. Due to this, the temperature remains almost similar throughout the year in Africa. Due to its location, Africa is the only continent on Earth that is present on all 4 hemispheres. Prime meridian divides Africa into eastern and western hemispheres, whereas equator divides Africa into northern and southern hemispheres. Africa is a relatively flat continent with average elevation of approximately 600 meters above sea level and have comparatively small area of either very high or very low ground. The area of land over 3000 meters is also quite insignificant, being represented almost entirely by individual peaks and mountain ranges. Moderately elevated plateaus are thus the characteristic feature of the continent, though the surface of these is broken by higher peaks and ridges. The highest point in Africa is Mount Kilimanjaro, 5,891.8 meters in Tanzania. The lowest point is Lake Assal, 153 meters below sea level in Djibouti. As a general rule, the higher plateaus lies to the east and south, while a progressive reduction in altitude towards the west and north is observable. Apart from the lowlands and the Atlas mountain range, the continent may be divided into 2 regions of higher and lower plateaus. The high southern and eastern plateaus have mean elevation of about 1000 meters. The South African plateau is bounded east, west and south by a band of high ground which falls steeply to the coast, making South Africa resemble a saucer. Moving northwards, a small patch of level ground having more of arid character is found. This part is known as Kalahari Desert. Kalahari Desert covers much of Botswana as well as parts of Namibia and South Africa. The Kalahari Desert is a vast region covered by red sand without any permanent surface water. These high red sand dunes are one of the most breathtaking attractions in Namibia. The South African Plateau is connected towards East African Plateau, which has a slightly greater average elevation. The most striking feature of this plateau is the existence of 2 great lines of depression, due largely to the subsidence of whole segment of Earth's crust, the lowest parts of which are occupied by the Great Lakes of Africa. Towards the south, the 2 lines converge and is occupied by Lake Malawi. Western Depression, also called as Albertine Rift, is occupied by Lake Tanganyika, which is the longest freshwater lake in the world. And the Tanzania Craton is occupied by the Lake Victoria, which is the largest lake in Africa. A tributary of River Nile, the White Nile, originates from Lake Victoria. A short distance east of this rift valley is Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, which is the highest point of whole of the continent. Moving little bit northwards, the third division of the high region of Africa is formed by the Ethiopian Highlands, a rugged mass of mountains forming the largest continuous area of its altitude in the whole continent, having the altitude varying between 1,500 meters and 4,550 meters. In this highland lies a circular basin occupied by the Lake Tana, which is the source of another tributary of River Nile, the Blue Nile. Both in the east and the west of the continent, the bordering highlands are continued as strips of plateau parallel to the coast. The Ethiopian mountains being continued northwards along the Red Sea coast, whereas in the west the zone of highland is broader but somewhat lower. The area between the east and the west coast highlands is mainly desert. It is subdivided into various basins and surrounding highlands. Interestingly, it contains another large lake of Africa, Lake Chad. Running along the south of the desert is the plains region known as the Sahel, which is the transition zone between the more humid Sudanian savannas to its south and drier Sahara to the north. The arid region, the Sahara, the largest hot desert in the world, extends from the Atlantic to the Red Sea. Though generally of low elevation, it contains mountain ranges with peaks rising to 2,400 meters in the northwest by the Atlas Range, and to the northeast, a rocky plateau separates it from the Mediterranean. Africa does not have high and long mountain ranges like other continents, and the existing mountain ranges are also the part of highlands and the plateaus. Most of the peaks are isolated. The continent is subdivided into High Africa and Low Africa, where High Africa extends from Ethiopia down south to South Africa, while Low Africa represents the plains of the rest of the continent. About 12% of the Africa's land area is covered under rainforests, which are found in three distinct areas, namely the Congo Basin, Upper Guinea, and isolated mountain forests and along East African coast. Africa's rainforests are not as wet as the Amazon and Asian counterparts. Within Africa's 3.5 million square kilometers of rainforest, there are just 5 reserves or national parks, covering an area of 63,000 square kilometers. 4 of these are in the Congo Basin, namely Ja Fauna Reserve, Lope National Park, Salonga National Park, and Okapi Fauna Reserve, and the 5th one, Tai National Park, is in the Upper Guinea Forest Block. From the outer margin of the African plateaus, a large number of streams run to the sea with comparatively short courses, while the larger rivers flow for longer distance on the interior highlands before breaking through the outer ranges. One of the world's longest river, the River Nile, empties into the Mediterranean. Congo, Niger, Volta, Senegal, and Orange rivers drain in the Atlantic Ocean. Zambezi, Limpopo, and Juba rivers drain in the Indian Ocean. Africa has several islands which are small in size with the exception of Madagascar, which after Greenland, New Guinea, and Borneo is the 4th largest island on the earth. Africa is one of the most blessed continents naturally. These countries have abundance of oil and other petroleum products. Most of these lies in Sahara and Sahel region. These countries generate food products. The Eastern Highlands and Madagascar have the perfect climate for tea and coffee production, whereas Western counterparts produce fishes. Incidentally, Côte d'Ivoire is the only country in Africa where high-quality cocoa beans are produced. These countries produce minerals like iron, aluminum, copper, phosphorus, etc. Niger has the abundance of uranium. These countries have abundance of precious metals and gems like gold, platinum, and diamonds. These countries produces the finest cotton and textiles in the whole of Africa. Equatorial Guinea produces the wood and wood products, whereas Malawi produces tobacco. So this is all about geography of Africa. I hope that you have liked it and learned something new. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more of such videos.